And good evening, our followers and listeners. It's 8:16 p.m. This Sunday, September 17th. This is Federico Lines of States Rights Radio.
And Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight we're going to be talking Trumpnomics, Bidenomics, or free trade economics. The choice is liberty or safety. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight was just kind of a general discussion on the economy and markets and stuff, because I hear a lot in the in the media, a lot of discussion right now from conservative media that Bidenomics is destroying America, and it's something that it's hard for me to discuss with people on either the right or left. I'm saying you're all wrong. The problem's central planning, and Trumpnomics is no different than Bidenomics. It's asking the president to run the economy is the problem. And, Bidenomics, I do not like Joe Biden's beliefs or his policies on the economy, but I didn't like Donald Trump's either. And this is the thing that we need to contend with is, do we want a free market or do we want a centrally planned economy?
No, you're right. And, this thing that, this constant excuse of voting for the lesser of two evils, or which both parties use all the time. It's really, they're just two evils. There's no lesser, there's no greater. It's two evils. And, whether you have when I see people Trumponomics or Bidenomics, or Reaganomics. I mean, Reaganomics, there was no free enterprise with Reaganomics either. I don't know why people think Reaganomics was great. Reaganomics gave federal funds to Wall Street. They gave our tax dollars to fund Wall Street. That's just like what Obamanomics, Trumponomics, and Bidenomics are doing. They're giving money to either the rich of the rich, which is Wall Street, or the poor of the poor, which is the social services. And it's the same thing. It's making the federal government stronger, and neither of them works.
Yeah, and I think back of my days when I was a rah-rah Republican, and I was a huge George W. Bush supporter at one time, which, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But one of the things that started waking me up to the problems was in the 2008 meltdown and the economic problems from then, when George W. Bush said to save the free market system, we have to abandon it. And I'm like, wait a minute. That is just absurd to the highest order. I mean, that is so stupid. And it just kind of woke me up to, the problems in our economy that have been they've been there for a long time. And I go back to this, that I think our free market system effectively was killed in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve, and we've been living with this kind of illusionary economy ever since, and especially after Nixon officially took us off the gold standard, and we just live in this debt-based economy, and that's not healthy.
I was also, in the beginning, I was also a Bush supporter, only because I think Bush did actually win the 2000 elections. The electoral vote went for Bush. The state electors of Florida decided for Bush. The popular vote is, nobody, I don't really count the popular vote. That's why I don't vote for presidential elections. But then later, as you start seeing with President Bush, you see a sense of centrism, and and a sense of centrism that is kind of not really working or helping and lying to the American people. And I always give this storyline that back in 2005, in his State of the Union address, Bush was proposing to privatize Social Security. I think it's great. I think Social Security should be privatized, and it should be back in the hands of the citizens, not in control of the federal government. But then, of course, you had Nancy Pelosi, you had Harry Reid take pictures in front of FDR's monument, and saying no, this is wrong. And then you had labor unions against it, and then all of a sudden you started popping out this little avian flu and attacks on Bush's policies. And then a couple of months later, the avian flu disappeared. Bush said, no, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm not going to paradise. I'm not going to continue with this proposal. Please just keep supporting my unconstitutional wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was the end of it. And, and then came Obama, and Obama made it worse with Obamacare. Then came Trump, and Trump really, he didn't initiate any policies. He just increased the size of the federal government. People think he decreased it, but he actually increased it. When you put federal troops in the border and when you put border security, doesn't matter if Texas borders Mexico, it's still a Texan border. But when you increase the size of the federal government, you're not doing anything. And then Biden as well hasn't done anything as well, and just increased the size of the federal government. And as you rightly put it, said, the death of the United States was 1913, with the creation of the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve and the Revenue Act of 1913. And that was the end, where you saw the federal government become more obliviated and more big and more expansive. Not big, expansive, a lot of expansions. And, you had the poverty war and all that from LBJ and Nixon with the housing market. It's just, it's hard for us to really get back pre-1913, but really post-1865. So we have to find a balance around there that makes America unique again. I'm not going to say great again. Unique. From post-1865 to pre-1913, that area. And, it's hard when both parties, Trumpnomics, Bidenomics, or Republicanomics and Democratic-nomics, is just one thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that it just kind of frustrates me. Is I know of some people who were Trump supporters who are no longer Trump supporters because of specifically 2020 and how he did COVID, but they still cling to this idea that Donald Trump oversaw the greatest economy ever, and they cling to this idea that the Trump presidency was really great up until 2020. And I'm somebody who was throughout Trump's presidency. I was, complaining about the big spending, and nobody would listen. Nobody who supported Trump would listen to that. I'd talk about the big expansion of government under Donald Trump, and nobody would listen. And it's hard to sit and listen to, conservative talking heads in the media now talking about, all the problems we're facing today are because of Joe Biden. And it's like, how do I deal with this? Because I don't like Joe Biden, but that's a lie that all the problems are Joe Biden's fault. It's just not true. This has been the way our government's worked since 1913, but just especially the last 4 or 5 administrations, 6 administrations, all the administrations in my lifetime have been just big, wild spending presidents. And the problems we have today it's all of their fault. And I cannot sit here and say, oh, it's all Joe Biden's fault. It's everybody's fault. And I'd want to point people to, John Williams Shadow Stats at shadowstats.com. This guy, he's been tracking like real numbers for quite a while. It doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican president, he's trying to give the most accurate data on things such as unemployment or inflation. And, Donald Trump bragged about having the best unemployment numbers ever. Well, unemployment, if it were tracked the way it was back in the 90s before they rigged the data, unemployment was above 20% throughout Trump's presidency, because they don't include people who have stopped looking for jobs and have probably gone on welfare. So this is the thing is that ultimately, I don't look to the president. I don't look to the Congress. I don't look to the government to create an economy. I look to the government to protect my liberty. It's up to we the people to create a booming economy. And if we have free markets, we're going to have ups and downs. But generally speaking, people are going to do a lot better. We just need to stop looking at government as the ones who control the economy. And that's the biggest issue, is that people think that the government is the central planner and should be the central planner for the economy, and they need to stop it. They need to look to themselves to create an economy and look to the government to protect our liberty. And that's where we need to move towards.
No, yeah, 2 points on that. Two points I want to make on that is that, Donald Trump's economy did not move an inch did not stimulate, his policies did not stimulate the economy. In all fairness, we have been in a recession since 2000. Since 2000, we've been in a recession. And I've always told this to people, and I've wrote it many times, that I think the best balance of power is when you have a conservative Congress and a liberal executive. Look into the results of 1947 to 1952 with Harry S. Truman and G.W. Halleck, Speaker of the House, Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. You had great policies come out of that. And I'm going to take the most recent one. Well, in 1947, you had a great labor policy that really helped the states, because before 1947, you had a humongous union monopoly, labor union monopoly that was crippling the American industry. But then came the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, and that really helped America. That really helped liberate the union monopoly and create jobs and create freedom and liberties for the American worker. But I'm going to take 1995. You had the largest surplus in American history, thanks to a conservative Congress, and also, work with a Democrat president, Bill Clinton. And then all that ended in 2001, where, after 9/11, and it's very sad that it happened. We can, later we can see, why it happened, who knew about it, and we can dive into all the conspiracy theories. But all that surplus that was collected through the 90s up to 2000 was all wasted and done because of the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the policies of Obamacare and Obama policies. So, this is something that people understand is we need to find a balance of power, because when George W. Bush had both houses of Congress, Republicans controlled both houses of Congress, you didn't get 1 inch. You had liberal policies out of that, and you had earmark spending. You actually had more liberal policies during the Bush years than the Obama years, because you had that earmark spending that you spend it out in Montana or Colorado or wherever. So this is a problem that people have to understand. You have to pick your balance, and that to me is the perfect balance. A conservative Congress, which right now is the Republicans, even though Republicans are not really conservative, and a liberal Democrat president. And there you're going to find, and when I mean a full working majority of conservatives, like in 95, like in 47, with a Democrat president, because then the president's going to say, I got to work with Congress to see how I can, we can work together. And that to me is the perfect balance of power. Why can't we look at that? Forget the White House. Forget control of the White House. Look at Congress. That's the most powerful chamber. That's the most powerful branch of government that we have, because they control the purse, they control the wallet. Who can control it better than conservatives? And then you have a liberal president. So it's something that I've always told people. I've always reminded people: look to that. Look to 47. Look to 1995, and we need to find that balance of power, because with Trump and a semi-control, or Biden and a semi-control, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get anything done, because the House may pass this, but the Senate will reject it. So until then, people have to realize that they have to forget this partisan politics and look at the perfect balance of power.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we need to look for is somebody who's going to, a government that's going to shut down all the unconstitutional agencies. And that's, because as we're talking a little bit about how, just specifically on the economy, but, I sent you a piece from the Huffington Post a few weeks back, and, effectively, about the Trump plan if he were to win in 2024, and Huffington Post, of course, coming from the left, and they get the big picture. They get completely wrong. They say that if Trump were to win re-election, that he's got a plot to dismantle the U.S. government. But when you read the plan, there's no plot to dismantle the U.S. government. He's just looking to replace all the workers with his own people who are Trumpites, and this is the point I'm trying to make the most, is that both sides are the same. The problem isn't that we have leftists in all the bureaucracies. The problem is that all these bureaucracies that are unconstitutional exist. We don't need to replace the current employees in these bureaucracies. We need to shut down the bureaucracies. And until we start understanding that, I just fear we're just going to get deeper into this tribalism, and it's so important for your guy to win, because your guy is going to, maybe give you a job in their administration, when I want liberty. I don't want bureaucracies that have no authority to exist under the Constitution. And this is something that's it seems impossible, an uphill battle to convince conservatives who, they express their love for the Constitution so much. But I'm like, have you read it? These bureaucracies don't have authority to exist in the first place. So, this Trump plan is just more evidence that the Republicans and Democrats are the exact same thing. They believe in government. They believe in government control. They believe in government running our lives. And, they just want to run it in a different way than the Democrats. And that's the big problem.
Yeah, it's tribalism politics, as you've said it, where, I'll give you a job, but then, Joe Smo will not get that job because he voted Democrat. And with Trumpism, we saw that more recently, when it was getting rid of James Comey and a few other ones in the FBI and here and there. And, it didn't, but it's always been like that, because, in the 1970s, Richard Helms was the CIA was afraid to lose his job because he was not really a Republican; he was a Democrat. So he had to play politics with Nixon, and you've always had that. It's a sense where which party controls the most and how to control it. And right now, neither of them. Just because you have an R doesn't mean that, you're going to do good, or you have a D, or even an L, Libertarian Party, where, I know we've spoken recently about Gary Johnson, where he actually came out and said, well, maybe the Christian baker should just bake the cake for the gay wedding. I go, wait a minute, hold on. It's, why are we letting the government decide what baking needs the cake, whether he's a Christian or even a gay baker to do a Christian wedding? If he doesn't want to take that business, it's his right to deny that business. Now, you can't deny business on account of race because that's in the Constitution. But for same-sex marriage, I mean, I'm a businessman, and if I want to make $500 to bake a cake, yeah, sure. I don't know how to bake a cake, but I'll take the money because I'm a businessman. So, you also have to think of a business, put aside your principle. I mean, your principles are important. I won't say not your principles, but in this time of day to make money and do business, and if your product is good, then, you will get a new clientele. It's like, for example, the movie I saw recently, The Best of Enemies, between a white supremacist and a black American woman down in North Carolina, where he was a rabid racist. He did not curtail to black Americans to come into his gas station to pump gas. And then, he was a deciding vote for integrating schools. And then, of course, the white, he lost a lot of white customers, but what? He gained black customers. He gained more black customers than white customers. He made money and says, you know what? This is how to make money. I got to make money. But that's a difference. That's just independence and liberty. But, in the sense of government telling you what to do, no, government's not here to tell you what to do. Government has never been to tell you what to do. But the problem is that every time government interjects in the market, in the free market world, economical world, with its indirect tariffs or direct tariffs or environmental policies, you're going to create panics. You're going to create worries. And that's what happened in 1929 when Herbert Hoover started instituting very progressive fiscal policies. And that's what happened in the Panic of 1837 and the Panic of 1893. Every time government interjects with some type of progressive economical policy, you get an economic downturn. And you cannot have that. We've been having that ever since 2000. And you're right, what George W. Bush said in 2008, that to cure this free markets to control and to get rid of the free markets to control. No, that's not it. And coming from George W. Bush, I was also very not disappointed, but like saying, whatever happened to his free market ideology of the Republican Party. And Trump is no better. Trump does it his way, and he institutes policies like that. And people have to understand that, it's not the way to go. That's why I want to see Trumpnomics or Bidenomics. There's no difference.
Yeah, and what happens is you get this basically this situation where the government actually does have authority. They don't do anything about it. I mean, they've abandoned their role in places where they are supposed to actually have authority, and then they do things everywhere. Everything that they do is outside of their authority. And I look at kind of the way the economics work. What is the government's role in the economy? It's very limited. They shouldn't be setting rules for the markets, but what they should have is that we have a court system. So if a business, let's say you get food poisoning from a restaurant, we have a court system that the customer can, hopefully get reimbursed for medical damage or whatever because of the restaurant's failures. But they don't even do that. I mean, we look at like Big Pharma, for instance. Big Pharma's got immunity from, their specifically vaccines. If people get injured by vaccines, it's nearly impossible to get compensated for it, and it creates an unfair playing field where there could be pharmaceutical companies that are producing better drugs, but they're not allowed to compete because all these other people have gotten so big and they have legal immunity, and it just creates this unfair playing field. You just I'm thinking back to Trump, and I remember during the height of lockdown, Stephen Moore was an economic advisor to Donald Trump. And Stephen Moore was somebody I always looked up to. I liked his work a lot until he got into the Trump administration, because he started abandoning every principle he used to stand for, because he was very big about free markets and, very big about, sound fiscal policy. And he had a debate during the height of lockdown with Peter Schiff, who Peter Schiff is, big gold guy and libertarian, just free market guy. And essentially Stephen Moore said he admitted in this debate that Donald Trump, he's a big government guy. He really does believe in government, but just look at the results of. I mean, he kept saying, "Look at the results of Trump's economy," and I'm like, "Yeah, I am looking at the results. I'm looking at the real numbers from Shadow Stats, and the results aren't good." But of course, he's saying, "Believe the government's lying numbers." And believe Donald Trump, even though I'm admitting that he represents everything I used to fight against. It just kind of disgusts me that like this guy who was always about free markets just suddenly is like, I guess I was wrong. You weren't wrong when you were discussing free markets. You are wrong now when you're pumping up Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that goes both ways, because when Obama was there, then you had people like Rahm Emanuel and other financial advisors saying, "Oh, look at the numbers. Obama got this, Obama got that," and quite honestly, the numbers are infatuated. The numbers are fake. From the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's not true. I mean, Obama's economy numbers were not as perfect as Trump's economy numbers, and they never will be. Even Bush. So, I mean, it's a sense of, as you said, tribalism. Like, look at my guy. My guy's better than your guy, or my guy can do it better, or I can do it better. And I don't want you to do it better. I want you just to leave us alone. And you're right. When government gets that power, that unconstitutional power, when there's an action to be had, where are they? Bernie Madoff. There were so many sound alarms of that guy creating Ponzi schemes and taking people's money and spending it and not even giving them results. Where was the SEC on that? Where were they? That's what happens when you get a bureaucrat to do something that's very important. They will not do it. Look at the post office. You want you want the SEC to be run like the post office, which it is. It's ineffective. It doesn't work. So, this is something that government in labor and business, they're not there to control it. They're not there to regulate it. The free market will regulate itself. That's why it happened in 1929, when Herbert Hoover started pumping in progressive policies of fiscal policies, progressive fiscal policies and progressive tax policies. People got spooked, people got scared, they took their money out, and that's why the market crashed, because there was a harsh reaction to government intervention. And it's been like this up and down, up and down. You had it with the housing crisis, this sense of people say it's deregulation. No, it's over-regulation. It's over-taxation. That's what you get when it's not deregulation. Actually, deregulation helps the economy. And I can give you the perfect example. From 1923 to 1929, you had a booming economy. Wall Street was thriving. Main Street was thriving. Wall Street was booming. There was free trade. There were no tariffs. We were trading with Germany. Germany was paying their debt to the First World War. They were making money with their products. It was, they had Mercedes-Benzes, they had Porsches, they had a vast industrial complex economy and this was before the rise of Nazism, where you had free trade economics. And, that's the best era that I can point out, where you had no sense of regulation, no sense of taxation, no sense of environmental regulations, and it was going great until, boom, you hit the first taxes from the federal government. Boom, the first regulation, and that's where you're going to get it. It's not deregulation, though. The next time you hear Mr. Bernie Sanders or anybody else say that it's the deregulation, no. Bull crap. It's not. It's not deregulation. It's over-regulation.
Yeah, and just talking about regulations, and that's another lie about the Trump administration. that he's heralded as this big deregulator, and it's true. He had a lot of headlines where he got rid of this regulation or that regulation, but if you actually looked at the regulatory code, it increased under Donald Trump. It grew by a smaller percentage than presidents in the past, but it's still increased. So that's not a deregulation president. The regulatory code is massive, and quite frankly, we should just start over. In fact, I say that this is what I kind of think about free markets. In a free market economy, you don't really have regulations from government. You have laws that, govern people, and it governs business owners as well. A business can't, murder people with their products. We have laws to govern people, including the businessman, but you don't have regulations. But in a free market economy, the regulator is the consumer. The consumer has the power to regulate the markets by saying, hey, I'm not going to buy your product because it's crap. I'm going to go to your competitor and buy their product. And that's the best regulator there is, the consumer. I often think people are so scared if we don't have regulations. Well, it's not that I don't believe in regulations. It's about who is the regulator. In a free market economy, the consumer is the regulator, and businesses have to cater to the consumer, who they're trying to get their dollars. And that's I was kind of fumbling with my words with talking about Big Pharma earlier. But this was kind of the point I was trying to make. In a free market economy, it encourages businesses to provide good quality products and services for a good price. When you have a controlled economy, the way you profit is by owning a politician, by having friends in high places. And that leads to corruption, and it leads to immoral practices by businesses. So in a free market economy, the businesses are catering to you. In a centrally planned economy, the businesses are catering to the politicians who are writing the rules. And that's why we want free markets, why we, the people, will have the power to, shut down a business that's providing crappy services and products. And so that's in free markets, we just get better results in general. There's no perfect system. There's still going to be bad actors in the business world in a free market economy, but we actually have power to deal with those bad actors then.
Yeah, and one thing that I'd like to point out is, and you're right, the in a free trade economic world, the regulator is the consumer. You're absolutely right. For example, you take Walmart, which is a conglomerate, and take the mom and pop supermarket store. I mean that, mom and pop supermarket store of Weepingtown, Nebraska, has been there for years and years. They sell their canned beans, they sell their products, they sell their milk. But here comes the big box store, which is Walmart, and it, comes at a cheaper price and a much bigger container. So people are going to go to Walmart. And, I've empathized with mom and pop. I really do. I mean, but again, if mom and pop had a store, I wouldn't shop at them. No, I'm just kidding. But I empathize with a mom and pop store because, it's their own business, and I feel bad that Walmart's taking over. But it's the nature of the beast, and, it's the nature of the regulator. You go to find something cheaper because mom and pop's milk is only $1.50. It's $3.50, and Walmart is $2.50. You're going to go with the cheapest. You're going to go with, and Walmart's milk is pretty good. Mom and pop is pretty good, but mom and pop is more expensive. So, that's, but what the problem there is that government will always try to save mom and pop. You can't save every business. The same thing is you can't save every farmer. That's why I don't support subsidies to farmers because, it's unfair. But the federal government has made it so to support every single farmer with their agriculture acts. That's what happened with the wheat situation with Wickard versus Filborn. You had a good, honest farmer, Filborn, trying to plant his crops. He planted a little too much than what the government said, and then he gets punished. But then the other farmer plants little, he gets a cut of he gets a taxpayer subsidy. It's unfair. Every time government gets involved in anything like that, you create chaos, you create disharmony, you create inequality. And isn't that something against the 14th Amendment, equal under law? Well, right now you're creating inequality under law. And, every time government gets in and interferes in the free market world, whether it's in farming or fishing or wherever, you create problems. You create a sense of disenfranchisement and entitlement that, whether it's Biden or Trump or Obama or W or Reagan or whoever, it's always been like this because they control. It's not really a party situation or a person like Trump or Biden. It's the federal government that's the problem. So whoever gets in, it's not going to do anything. He may give you a little inch of something. Oh, yeah, I did this. I cut this. Yeah, you cut a minimal red tape, Trump. You didn't slash red tape. You didn't drain the swamp. You unclogged it, and you clogged it more. And this is the other segment I want to discuss with liberty or safety, with our national security. You clogged the swamp with more security features into the Constitution and more like a more police state. And this situation that I've always was always against, the whole building of the wall thing, that we need to protect our borders. Whose borders? Because last time I checked, the federal government's borders is in international borders. That's not an international border. That's a Texan border. That's a border that borders with a sovereign state. And the same thing with Florida. Florida has its own coastal borders. But there you have the federal government interfering on the immigration naturalization. And this is something that people said, well, you need a central authority so people can cross state lines with no one checking your papers. Who's saying that? We're not asking for everything. We're not asking for the state of Georgia to have a checkpoint. No, people can still cross freely into other states, but the state government has to control its borders. And if there's a criminal act, then that's where the state government steps in. If there's a federal act, a federal violation of an act, then the federal government will step in with its marshals. But I'm not saying that every state border will have a checkpoint. This is not a European country. This is a sovereign states of a united country, and people fail to grasp that. But what more importantly is that the liberty or safety. Do you want liberty to roam our states, or do you want a central authority roaming our states, controlling our states with the Patriot Act, with the NSA Act, and God knows the Espionage Act of 1916? We don't want that. That's really not what America is for. We don't want a central authority on that. So that's why the second segment is called Liberty or Safety.
Yeah, and the thing, bringing up the borders. Well, first let me touch on liberty and safety, and just bring up the quote from, I think it was Ben Franklin, that those who want safety over liberty will get neither. That I kind of butchered it. I don't remember the exact wording, but but the point is that when you demand safety and security from government, you lose your liberty and you'll be less safe. But speaking about the border and border walls and worries about having to show your papers to go in. Into other states. Well, we actually kind of get that show me your papers Nazi-esque mentality with the government, the federal government taking over, because we actually have this idea of Constitution free zones, which if you're within 100 miles of the border, basically the federal government can set up checkpoints at will and, demand people show their papers. And, I've seen videos of this in years past in like Arizona. They're not on the border, but, the federal government's saying there's a problem with illegal immigrants in a town or something like that. And they set up these checkpoints where people have to show their ID to move freely in the United States, and that's a big problem. At best it's just a hindrance. It's just something that slows your day down. At worst, it's the government trying to just exert control and authority over people. And so we actually because we've let the federal government define, the 100-mile radius from, either the Canadian border or the Mexican border as constitutional free zones where, they can set up checkpoints. We get exactly what people are claiming to be worried about when we actually let the states control the borders. So, we need to stop being afraid too of illegal immigrants, and I don't deny that there are people who come over the border illegally who do commit crimes, but I still think the majority of them are just coming over to take jobs to make some money to send back home, and we got to stop being afraid of them. The real problem is the welfare system that not only illegals can get welfare, but American citizens. I have a problem with welfare in general. I don't want anybody to be on welfare. So that's the real problem. And the immigrants are not, we need to stop being afraid of them. And deal with criminal actors. We should be dealing with all criminal actors, but whether they're illegal immigrants or if they're American citizens. But we paint with broad brushes that we need to be afraid of these people, and fear is the best tool of control for the government. And we'll probably touch on that after 9/11, the fear of this boogeyman terrorist that nobody's ever seen, or COVID. We get the fear of a cold virus. This is their best tool of control over us, and I see that with the immigration debate. And I have a lot of sympathies with the arguments that we have problems at the borders, but we need to have reasonable discussions and not get sidetracked by the fear mongering.
And the thing is that my big issue is with MAGA individuals and Trump is that they want the federal government to control the situation, and it's not really up to the federal government. I have seen quotes from many senators in the old days where they actually said that the sovereign states are there to enforce the clause and immigration situation. Thomas Jefferson has even said it. James Madison has said it. John C. Calhoun has said it. Many people have said it. And, Trump, except for Trump has actually, in Good Morning America back in 2015, says that when he was discussing his Muslim ban proposal, that what he's doing is no different than FDR. Oh, nice. So he wants to institute an internment camps. Instead of being Japanese Americans, it would be Muslim Americans. Oh, that's nice. I mean, why are we allowing this to happen? Jefferson told Adams when he passed the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798, do you intend to ship out the entire French population of the United States or any other luckless soul that wishes to have a country opinion to the federal government? You cannot do that. Just because they have a different opinion than you are, you can't say, oh, you're an enemy of the state. You're in protective custody. No. You cannot do that. The federal government is not there to. If you commit a crime that is a federal statute, but not at the sense of a border statute, of an immigration statute. If a French individual criticizes the federal government for its policy, for the English policy during the Napoleonic Wars, that's so unconstitutional. The same thing with Japanese Americans in the Second World War, or Muslim Americans during the Muslim ban. That, Trump versus Hawaii of 2018, the Supreme Court allowed that to happen. They allowed a Muslim ban to come to be set in American policy. That's not right. I mean, if there's a Muslim American that is a hardworking person and is working hard, and he has no threat, no nothing, then his rights should not be violated. But just because he's Muslim, we cannot have this sense of fear to get that control that Trump wants to impose, or Biden, or Obama, or Bush. So, Michelle Malkin wrote a book that I can't stand Michelle Malkin. And she wrote a book comparing the Japanese Americans with the Muslim American ban. And I'm like, come again? These are innocent civilians that were arrested, and they lost their businesses, they lost their homes, they were sent to a camp in Wyoming and Arizona and Texas against their will. Are you telling me that you are okay with that? I mean, that's not what America is all about. It's not about a central authority. So for Trump to quote FDR, and this is what MAGA, I just can't believe MAGA would even, I would never quote FDR. I would never in my mind quote a man such as like FDR. But for Trump to quote FDR, and the Trumpers are like, oh yeah, FDR. I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? So that's how denial and delusional this MAGA movement is, and Trump is. And, this sense of federal government intervention on our simplest of immigration laws that belong to the states and not to the federal government. Now, hold on. Let me backtrack, Seth. Just one thing. The federal government can pass immigration laws, but states can also pass immigration laws as well and say, listen, we're not gonna cooperate with yours. We're gonna do our own at our own time. We're not gonna cooperate with yours. We're gonna nullify yours, and we're gonna create our own laws. And that's the difference between what happened in Arizona and now with Florida with E-Verify, where DeSantis is enforcing federal immigration law of E-Verify, which the Supreme Court will most likely shut it down because states cannot enforce federal immigration law, and rightly so. States can enforce their own law on immigration, but they cannot enforce federal immigration law. So federal immigration law can exist, there's no doubt about it, but states don't have to enforce it, and states should not enforce it. States should not give 1 cent of their state budget to enforce federal law. States have to enforce their law with their own money. That's the difference that I want to point out here. And Trump has no idea, and Trump just wants a centralized authority. The same thing with Biden, a centralized authority. The only difference is that, well, no, there's no difference because they're not going to be functioning. They're going to be useless.
Yeah, and you brought up E-Verify, and that's the type of thing that happens when you push this fear mentality. You get people who support things like E-Verify, which, by the way, that means you as an American citizen have to show your papers to get a job. It doesn't just apply to illegals. It doesn't just apply to, it applies to all of us. We need to get permission from the government to get a job. That is ludicrous. We should be opposed to it. Sure, we might have a problem with immigration, and too many people are coming in illegally, and we want to know who's coming in. Okay, let's deal with it rationally without destroying our liberty and without destroying anybody's liberty. And we just need to come look at these issues from a rational perspective, and with the idea that we want to preserve liberty. That's the utmost importance, is preserving liberty, not being afraid of people crossing the borders, illegally and stuff. The problems there are generally because the government is handing out all these freebies to people, whether they're immigrants or born and raised American citizens. That's where the problem really lies, is the government handing out stuff to everybody, and nobody wants to address that. We want to put in these liberty destroying things like E-Verify, and that's why we need to step back and discuss these issues from a rational perspective, in which we're not afraid of anybody. What we're doing is trying to preserve liberty, and how do we do that?
Yeah, and one thing is that with E-Verify, it's the federal government telling the citizens and non-citizens, I need to see your papers. No, federal government does not need to see that. Federal government, again, there is nothing in the Constitution that says the executive branch is the enforcers of the law, of the immigration law. It just says Congress establishes a uniform code of naturalization. That's fine. Congress can establish it, but states enforce it. This is the problem that people don't understand. This Constitution was made by the states. And the states are the ones who need to protect it, not the federal government. There is nothing in the federal government, there's nothing in the Constitution that dictates the federal government to control. Only the 16th and 17th, and then they've taken the liberty to say, we have control to pass taxes, we have the right to control immigration, we have the right to commerce, we have a right to and other rights. So the federal government has no rights. But because of the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment, the federal government has come in and says, oh, you know what? We're here to control. We already control the tax situation. We're going to control immigration. We're going to control commerce, and etc. So this is where, and they're going to control labor, and they're going to control the healthcare, and they're going to control agriculture and the energy. And that's not really what it's supposed to do. So we have to get away from that. But we have to alert people that neither Trump or Biden or Republican or Democrat or even Libertarian, because Libertarians still they kind of have that mentality of federal government involvement, and so we have to really understand the basics of federal government power, and this is not one of them. Commerce is not one of them. And when you have people like Trump saying, yes, it is, no, it's not. And it's hard to debate, because you get this MAGA cult, or you get this Biden cult, or you got the Obama cult, where they think, oh yeah, government has a right to enforce and control healthcare. No, they don't. Show me where. I mean, just because the Commerce Clause says that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among the states doesn't mean enforce. It doesn't mean enforce. So, people have twisted and turned these wordings, like, they think it's on the favor of federal government. It never has been. The federal government is not there to control, and Trump has not done 1 inch to protect the right of the states or the right of the individual. And neither has Biden, neither has Trump. I don't know if we'll ever see somebody like Calvin Coolidge or Grover Cleveland, your favorite, Seth. I don't know where, it's hard to see that again. Or even Robert Taft. I was reading about Robert Taft, the senator from Ohio, back in the 40s and the 50s. And he was him and Goldwater were one of the last ones that were the protectors of the state and protectors of its citizens. Yeah,
and that's really it, is getting the government back to its proper role and authority. It's on one hand, it's easy to do. On the other hand, it's very hard to do. And what I mean by that is that I think if the people were to stop demanding the government do more and more, we could change this overnight. With the politicians, as much as I don't like politicians, if their jobs were on the line, they'd start doing the right thing. If they were worried about losing an election because they're little tyrants, they'd probably change their tune pretty quickly. But ultimately, that's a big hill to climb, though, is getting people to desire liberty, because it requires some more responsibility on our part, and everybody wants freedom. I always say liberty is where freedom and personal responsibility exist. Everybody wants freedom; they want their freedom, but nobody wants to take responsibility for how they use their freedom, and that's the big problem. But we just need to tap into that attitude again. That I'd rather have liberty than security, and that I want to do for myself. I don't want to take from others. I want to build my own life without being told what to do. And I'll accept responsibility when I make mistakes. I'll own up to those mistakes. But people don't want to do that part. They just want freedom, and they don't want the responsibility that comes with it. And that's, I think I try to point that out all the time, is that that people don't want to. They don't want to do what they're responsible for. And, they will complain about the government's doing this or that to them, but it's partly because you're not owning up to controlling your own life, and that's the big problem.
Yeah, and the problem is that nowadays we've seen it on both sides of the aisle, where we don't take responsibility for ourselves. We just wait to be depended on and entitled. And this goes for both whites, blacks, Hispanics, everybody. There is no discrimination based on entitlements or based on dependency. You see it on the south side of Chicago. You see it on some parts of Mississippi and Arkansas and California. There is no racism or discrimination when it comes to entitlements and dependency. And this is really sad because, here you say, oh, well, Trump helped the numbers for black Americans. Where? What? So he gave money to black Americans, but he didn't give money to white Americans. No, he gave money to everybody. Because, when COVID hit in back in 2020, I got my COVID stimulus check. I only got one, but I got it. But I continued to work. I didn't apply for another one. That's why they didn't give me another one. But the sense of dependency and entitlement, like I'm entitled for this money. No, as Francis Underwood, which is a shame that he's a Democrat, but Francis Underwood in House of Cards, you're entitled to nothing. You work your life, you pay into the system or don't pay into the system, but you're working to pay up for yourself. You're entitled to nothing. I'm working to provide to myself and myself alone, and I'm contributing to my independence, to my retirement fund, but I'm not expecting much from the Social Security because I know that I'm not going to get it, so I'm not going to pull out early because I'm not entitled. I don't want to be entitled, because once you're entitled, once you create that dependency, then you will be labeled a bum. You will be labeled the bare minimum and laziness, and I don't want to be labeled that. I really don't. There has been a deep change in that, and both sides have shown that change on the American workforce. Now you see the unions are striking, workers in the auto workers are striking because they think they're entitled to a 40% increase. They're workers. They're not executives. They're workers. Yeah, maybe they could be raised a little bit more, but not 40%, 50%, almost 50%. No, they're not entitled for that. They're, they're workers. They work. They have to be entitled for their merit, not because of their work status, their merit. And, I'm sure Trump will be out there supporting the auto workers and auto workers union because Trump is a big union goon. The same thing with Biden. Biden has always been a union goon ever since the 1970s. So there is no difference out there for Trump economics or Biden economics. And my last feel for this, my last thought is that, there isn't any difference. There is not a slight difference in this. It's all the same. They're out there to control you one way or another. Think for yourself and know better and stop being dependent of the federal government, whether it's Trump or Biden. Just stop it and be yourself.
Yeah, and that's just kind of my clarion call is just, think for yourself, live free, stand up for your rights. We've talked in recent episodes about knowing your rights a lot when you're dealing with police and stuff. But that's really people. It's really on us to desire liberty and to stand up for our rights, and that's the best solution to all the problems, is an informed and free-thinking society. Elections are like we've talked about, are basically meaninless these days. The real way to change things is for people to wake up to their rights, knowing their rights, standing up for their rights, and just resisting unconstitutional authority. I'm not an anarchist. The government does have certain legitimate authority, and I believe in that authority. But they've gone so far outside of their bounds of authority. They don't do what they're supposed to do, and everything that they do is outside of their authority. And people just need to think for themselves and, act upon it, act upon their rights, use their rights, know their rights.
Yeah, you're right. And, you and I are not anarchists. We have to obey what we have to obey. Sadly, we have to pay taxes. I don't want to go to jail, but I do want to propose to repeal the 16th Amendment and get rid of all the taxation policies that's been implemented because, it's a burden on this country. But until then, I'm afraid I'm going to have to continue to pay taxes and, know what the law is. But, we have to we have to be informative and we have to know. And, think for yourself. Don't just think Republican or Democrat. Think for yourself and know what you're getting yourself into when you go into that ballot. You Trump economics, Biden economics, or just free trade economics. Think about it clearly. And, so it is 9:17. Seth, it's always a pleasure, these discussions and debates. And we'll see you guys next Sunday at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, 7:30 Central. Thank you so much.
Good night.